Hello, I'm Leonard Nimoy. Welcome to the Sci-Fi Channel's TrekFest 96. To celebrate Star Trek's 30th anniversary, the Sci-Fi Channel has put together an event never before seen on television. You're invited to attend the letterboxed broadcast premiere of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, and Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, all presented in their original widescreen format. You'll see these three films as they were meant to be seen. In 1979, Star Trek made the unprecedented move from the small screen to the theater screen when the original cast was reunited for Star Trek The Motion Picture. And while we were all thrilled to be part of Star Trek again, when the film was done, we couldn't help but feel somewhat disappointed with the outcome. Even though the film was visually stunning, we all felt that it failed to recapture the magic of the original series, and the critics agreed. But the fans were so thrilled at the return of Star Trek, the film went on to gross over $100 million. I was sure I had worn Spock's ears for the last time. However, Paramount had other plans. The studio hired Harve Bennett, producer of The $6 Million Man and The Mod Squad, to begin production on another Star Trek movie. Harve sat down and watched all 79 episodes of the original series, and of all of them, the one that really jumped out at him was an episode entitled Space Seed. It told the story of Khan Noonien Singh, a genetically engineered superhuman who, after a failed attempt to take over the Enterprise, is stranded by Kirk and crew on an inhospitable planet. So we jump ahead in the story 15 years. Kirk and crew have gone on to new pursuits, and no one remembers the man stranded all those years ago. A man whose capacity for vengeance is only eclipsed by his wrath. And now, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. From the moment I first walked onto the set, I knew that Star Trek II would be vastly different from its predecessor. Star Trek The Motion Picture had been a study in cool shades of gray. Star Trek II immediately established itself in warmer, more welcoming colors. While the first film had been influenced by 2001, A Space Odyssey, attempting to capture the mystery of space, silent, cold, and vast, The Wrath of Khan was about heat, vengeance, and human emotion. Above all, however, it's a story about loyalty, devotion, and sacrifice for the needs of the many. And now, back to Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. By now, you've surely realized that between those beautiful Vulcan ears, other than mine, of course, lies the equally beautiful face of Kirstie Alley, perhaps best known for her 6 years of playing the character Rebecca Howe on the hit comedy Cheers. When Kirstie appeared in Star Trek, however, she called herself fresh off the turnip truck. The Wrath of Khan was her first time ever on camera, and Kirstie performed with Vulcan perfection. Interestingly, Savik's character was originally written as a half Romulan, half Vulcan, thus giving rise to her emotional damn in the simulator scene at the beginning of the film. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, any further reference to Savik's mixed and potentially volatile heritage were eliminated from the script. Now, back to Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. The dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 1. Director Nicholas Meyer's original title for Star Trek II was The Undiscovered Country, a title that would later resurface as the title for Star Trek VI, The Final Voyage of the original crew of the Starship Enterprise. The title was changed to The Vengeance of Khan and then to The Wrath of Khan when it was decided that vengeance was too similar to the upcoming third Star Wars film, Revenge of the Jedi. As it turned out, George Lucas changed his title to Return of the Jedi, but The Wrath of Khan stayed. Back to Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Star Trek II so successful was Ricardo Montalban's return in his role as Khan. But Ricardo was not content to simply reprise his role. Oh no. This Khan was not the cool, calculating exile ruler of 15 years ago. This was a Khan driven to the edge of insanity by years of isolation, the death of his wife, and his hatred of James T. Kirk. When he first arrived on the Star Trek set, fresh off his role as Mr. Rourke on Fantasy Island, Ricardo had a bit of a surprise waiting for him. The crew had rigged up a 3-foot-tall remote-controlled robot with Hervé Villechaise's face pasted on the front. Needless to say, with Tattoo at his side, Ricardo felt right at home. And now, back to Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. If you stop and think about it, you realize that while there's a tremendous amount of dialogue between Khan and the crew of the Enterprise, they never do actually share the screen together. Ricardo Montalban's scenes were filmed before myself and the rest of the Star Trek cast even reported for our first day of shooting. In fact, if you look closely at the bridge of Khan's commandeered ship, Reliant, you'll notice it is actually the Enterprise bridge set, simply altered by recovering the chairs with a different color material and making a few other cosmetic changes. Throughout Star Trek's history, redressing a set, as it is called, has always been a quick and inexpensive way to avoid having to build a totally new one from scratch. A few light changes, some decoration, and presto, Spock's quarters become Kirk's quarters, or anyone's quarters for that matter. We saved money on special effects too. Take a close look at Space Lab Regular 1. It's the same model that was used in Star Trek the Motion Picture as the orbiting space office, only in this movie, it's upside down. Now, back to Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. II had many parents. The original concept was a one-page story idea from executive producer Harve Bennett. Soon after, Bennett and writer Jack Sowards developed this concept into a screenplay entitled The Omega Syndrome. In this script, Khan wasn't merely satisfied with seeking vengeance on Kirk. Instead, the plan was for him to use the Omega system, which would later become the Genesis Project, to dominate not only the Federation, but the Klingons and the Romulans as well. Later, the project was handed to writer Samuel Peoples, who had written the second Star Trek pilot, Where No Man Has Gone Before, back in 1966. Peoples' version of the script dropped many of the earlier elements, including, surprisingly enough, Khan himself. Finally, Bennett turned to director Nicholas Meyer, who reworked the story into its final form by pulling all of the elements that seemed to work from all of the previous versions of the story. Amazingly, Nick turned the finished screenplay around in 12 days. In the end, the screen credit went to Jack Sowards for the screenplay. But without the contribution of all of these talented writers, The Wrath of Khan would have been very different indeed. And now, back to Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Obsession is a powerful human emotion, and one that Star Trek has dealt with in the past. The classic tale of the pitfalls of obsession is Herman Melville's Moby Dick. In pursuit of the elusive white whale, Captain Ahab's obsession leads him to disregard all else in his passion for vengeance. The Wrath of Khan has a number of references to the Melville classic. On a shelf of the wrecked SS Botany Bay sits a well-worn copy of Moby Dick, obviously a work which Khan has grown to know well. And of course there are Captain Ahab's last words as he perishes with the great white whale. From hell's heart I stab at thee, for hate's sake I spit my last breath at thee. Those words will soon come to have dire meaning for the crew of the Enterprise. Now, back to Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.